Hi there. Let's talk about setting and achieving big goals. Hello, I'm Joanne Gates. I am an executive business coach. I just recently left a 30-year career at Microsoft where I went from entry level to the executive ranks. I am on a mission to help as many women as possible ascend into the senior leadership ranks and kick ass once they're there. So, lots of us have really big goals, even if we don't want to admit it to ourselves. And if we're brave enough to write down those big goals, we often don't know exactly how to go about making it real versus just feeling like it is a dream. I was chatting with a client last week who's currently an individual contributor and she wants to become a manager. And she said, "Well, it's not like I want to become VP or anything." And I said, "Well, why not?" And she paused and looked at me like, "Well, you're right. Why don't I have that aspiration? Could I become the vice president? Why am I already telling myself that I can't?" So, if you have had a big dream and haven't quite been ready to write it down and try to go after it, I'm hoping that this webinar will give you some inspiration, some tricks and tips to accomplish and see that to success. First thing is actually writing it down, not just keeping it in your brain, but get a piece of paper out and write down your big goals. They can be anything. It could be becoming a vice president. It could be creating a trip to Italy. It could be getting a promotion in the current role that you're in. Maybe it's owning your first home. What are those goals? And write them all out. The next step you're going to take is breaking that goal into manageable pieces. So let's use the example of planning that awesome trip to Italy. You're going to need to request the time off, decide how many days you're going to be able to go on this trip, potentially what your budget is, what towns and cities you want to see, who's going to come with you, maybe who's going to watch the dog while you're away. Now, the next step you're going to take is write out all of the obstacles that are going to get in the way of your success here. If you're anything like me, you can probably fill a whole page with all the reasons why that big goal just seems like a dream. That list is going to become the set of strategies that you need to develop to be able to get to achieve that goal. Before you figure out what the right strategies are that are going to drive you to achieve this big goal, there is a tool that I want to introduce you to that's called the model. Years ago, I had a counselor who introduced me to the whole premise that it's our thoughts that actually create our feelings. It's that story that we tell ourselves before that feeling actually happens. And then a few years ago, I came across a podcaster who's now a coach who took that concept and went so much further and exploded my mind into a million pieces. So, the model. This podcaster, coach, turns everything into one of five things. Something is either a circumstance, a thought, a feeling, an action or reaction or inaction, and a result. And again, our thoughts create our feelings, which drives our actions and inactions, which creates our result. And the biggest mind blowing part was the concept that our thoughts are optional. They're sentences in our mind. And we can choose to think a different thought if that first one isn't serving us. And I was like, what? You can choose your thoughts? Hello. And then once you absorb the concept that your thoughts are optional, her position is if that thought is not serving you, it's not creating the feeling you want, the action you want, the result you want, you can choose a different thought. Now, you might be thinking to yourself, great, wonderful little story there. What the heck does that have to do with achieving big results? Well, this is actually where so much of the magic happens, because you're going to start thinking about those obstacles, and the thoughts that you have about those obstacles are going to create a set of feelings, which are going to drive different actions, which will have different results. So again, let's break this down and try to use an example. We're going to stick with the planning the trip to Italy. One of the items on your list is going to be buying the airline tickets, and an obstacle could be that's going to be flippin' expensive. How am I ever going to afford to do that? And if that becomes your thought, is there's no way I can ever get the funds that are going to be required for an international trip. Well, guess what? That's going to drive your actions or inactions. And your result is you are never going to buy those tickets. Instead, if you have a thought of, okay, getting those tickets are going to be expensive, and I currently don't have a path to be able to do that. What's the strategy that I'm going to use to overcome that obstacle of the cost of the airline tickets? And you start getting pretty darn creative when you have the thought of, I'm going to figure out a way to save enough money or create new funds to cover the cost of that airline ticket. I've got birthdays coming up, and my parents give me $50 or $100. If I pack my lunch for work for 3 months, that'll put half of it away. If you want something badly enough, do you find some side hustle that is going to specifically go towards your vacation fund? Where else do you have spending that you're going to just decide for this period of time? I'm not going to have a Netflix subscription for, 6 months, and use those dollars towards the money that's needed for an airline ticket. And so again, figuring out the sneaky thoughts, they tend to be sneaky. You sometimes don't even realize that they're there, but really investigating them and understanding how much of that obstacle is just in your head. And if you change that thought from seemingly negative to something that's more future focused and positive, your brain will come up with good, solid, workable ideas that will move you towards your goal. So go back to that list of obstacles and start writing down the different thoughts that come up against those obstacles. I can never do that. My boss won't give me that kind of time off. I wouldn't know where to go. I don't have anyone to go with. I don't know anyone that can take care of the dog. So you see what we're doing. We've set a big goal. We've broken it down into more manageable pieces. We're identifying the different obstacles that are going to get in the way of those different pieces. We're identifying the thoughts that are behind the obstacles, or what we perceive as obstacles. And we're going to challenge ourselves to say, is that thought serving me? Or is it holding me back and leaving me without ever getting to Italy? And what thoughts do I want to use that are going to create the positive feelings and motivation that will drive the necessary actions that will get me to achieve that meaningful or manageable piece of that goal, and ultimately, cumulatively, the overall goal. So I hope you liked the introduction to the model, and you start looking for those places where those sneaky thoughts are coming to play. They're not serving you. They're creating a feeling and an action, a result that you don't like. And you start wondering, do I want to keep thinking that thought? Is there a different thought that I want to think? Listen, I'm not here to tell you what you should and shouldn't think. You get to think whatever you want. If it is not serving you, I encourage you to think about changing it to something, again, that's going to motivate you to drive those actions that are going to achieve that goal. So I hope you have found this helpful, and you're creating all those big goals, you're figuring out those different obstacles, and you're examining the thoughts that are holding you back so that you can break through them and achieve everything that you want to achieve.